Hi everybody, here we are again with the second episode of our Eulogy of the Unconscious, and we are going to talk about argument 3 and 4. First we will see what are the limits of assuming a coherent and fixed identity, and then we will have an interesting discussion on the concept of responsibility linked to the unconscious. So an important concept to start from is the idea that the ego, our most exterior and continuous self, is not the owner of its own house. And this is because a new guest has appropriated its territory and they now have to share their idea of identity. It's not a new guest because it was not always there, but it's rather new because we might feel its presence more in some moments rather than in others. So the ego is threatened by the unconscious because it will inevitably bring discrepancy to its fixed and stable sense of self that it needs to survive. So the idea of psychoanalysis is that mental illness actually stems from an excessive strengthening, an excessive protectiveness of the ego. And therefore the analysis goal is to pacify these two instances. The other implication of this new reasoning, opposed to the one that sees the ego as weaker when we suffer, is that it's not only absurd but also harmful to assume an immutability of the ego. Our identity is flexible, constantly influenced by a multitude of needs, and defining it prevents us from exploring it. So inevitably, when the defenses go up for the ego and the unconscious starts to push, we have a moment of crisis that can lead to seeking therapy. And the questions posed to the analyst often start from an inability to recognize oneself. This makes total sense in that there is a denied part that exceeds our sense of identity that starts to come to the surface, leading us to become even more tight and scared. What we risk with this modeling, with the extirpation of unwanted parts, is to lose our core, to lose the contact with our desire. And this is a great chance to progress and creativity that we're missing. So what started as a form of protection becomes a limit to our true realization. It's a way of fading, of disappearing in the process of protecting our safety. We lose the permeability that is necessary to evolve, not only to us, but to groups, to institutions, to societies. And this way we go back to the necessity of really nourishing all sides of us. Hopefully, we have now a clear idea of what Freud meant when he invented the unconscious. And with this knowledge, we can approach an important ethical question about it. If there are all these incoherent forces inside of us, if there is a part of us that even barely talks to us, if not through dreams and symptoms, how are we expected to be free? How can the unconscious not become an alibi? Freud makes yet another revolution. It's the one of saying that having an unconscious makes us even more responsible in its regards. First, we are responsible of whether we want to recognize the value of truth of our dreams. And then we have the responsibility of deciding what to do with this truth, whether we want to assume it as something that concerns us. This responsibility, if accepted, leads to analysis. And here we don't necessarily mean psychoanalysis or even therapy. Of course, these are probably the best and most efficient ways to do so. But what analysis really means is to have an analytic and non-judgmental approach towards ourselves. On the other hand, if we decide to ignore this need and avoid to take responsibility, we are moving towards a life of hypocrisy. Winnicott describes this hypocrisy with the term false self. It's what happens when there is a non-integration between parts, in this case considered good and bad. None of these parts can ever cease to exist, so all they do is keep existing separately, split. And this derives from a paranoid tendency that places the evil outside by projecting on the other everything the subject cannot accept of himself. The paranoia is a state of mind that assumes innocence of the subject and is, for Recalcati, anti-analytical for this reason. The analysis forces us to see good and evil not as antitheses, but continuous, not taken together as part of a spiral. This is the real integration, understanding that the enemy, the stranger, is inside of us. This is the difference with self-proclaimed pure people. They place the evil outside and are this way prevented from ever feeling true forgiveness and gratitude that are only possible when we recognize the bad in us without moral judgment. I think that that's another interesting point to leave you to think. And as always, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and I will see you next week. Thank you.